close your eyes and see this. You're sitting alone in your room, not crying, not angry, not broken, just still. There's a strange silence around you, not the kind that aches, but the kind that reveals. The kind of silence that arrives only after you've finally said the thing you were always too afraid to say. The kind that comes after you've finally walked away, not in rage, not in drama, but in clarity. And here's the twist. You didn't leave anyone else. You left who you were when you were with them. You finally chose yourself, and now you're completely alone, not just physically, but existentially. No more applause to chase, no more roles to perform, no more comfort in compromise, just you. And in that space, a feeling creeps in, not regret, not guilt, but something far stranger, loneliness, not the kind that begs for attention, but the kind that confirms your decision. It's the loneliness of stepping outside the tribe, of removing the mask that made everyone love you, of letting go of being the good one, the loyal one, the soft one, the reasonable one. The loneliness of finally realizing, to be true to myself, I had to become a stranger to who I used to be. Isn't it ironic? They told you self-respect would feel powerful. They told you self-love would feel liberating. They told you that once you set boundaries, once you walked away from toxicity, once you chose yourself, you'd feel whole. But nobody told you about the silence. Nobody warned you about the void. Nobody prepared you for how empty and strange it would feel to finally stop betraying yourself, because for years your identity was made of other people's expectations. Your kindness was performative. Your peace was bought through self-sacrifice. And now that you've dropped the act, you're not sure who's left. What happens when healing makes you invisible? What happens when growth isolates you from everything familiar? What happens when your soul finally speaks, and no one is around to hear it? Is that strength or exile? They celebrate the phoenix rising from the ashes, but they never show you the moment right after the fire, when there's nothing but smoke, silence, and the overwhelming question, did I just burn down everything for nothing? Maybe you know this feeling. Maybe you've just said no to someone you always said yes to. Maybe you stopped explaining yourself and nobody noticed. Maybe you stopped showing up for people who never showed up for you, and the phone hasn't rung since. Maybe, just maybe, you've started to see how shallow some of your old relationships really were. How much of your life was built on your willingness to abandon yourself just to belong. And now, as you step back into your own body, your own voice, your own truth, it feels like no one is waiting for you on the other side. That's the cost of choosing yourself. It's not just the loss of others. It's the loss of your old identity. The grief of finally telling the truth. I was never loved for who I was. I was loved for how well I disappeared. So let me ask you something. What is the price of self-respect if it costs you everything else? Can you live with being misunderstood forever if it means never misunderstanding yourself again? Can you stand in your own integrity even if no one claps? This is the paradox. We all want to be free, but we don't want to be alone. We all want to be authentic, but we're terrified that our truth will make us unlovable. We all want to choose ourselves, but not if it means sitting in a room that no one else enters. So here you are, free, authentic, real, and alone. Is this what healing looks like? Is this what truth feels like? Is this what it really means? To choose yourself. You wanted liberation, but you got silence. You wanted power, but you got solitude. You wanted self-respect, but now you're wondering if that's just a poetic word for exile. So now the question is, what do you do with loneliness once you've finally chosen yourself? You see, the world never teaches you how to be whole. It teaches you how to be wanted. From the very beginning, you are rewarded for shrinking, for being agreeable, for pleasing others. You're not taught to ask, what do I want? You're taught to ask, what do they want from me? And so, long before you understand love, you understand approval. Before you know yourself, you know how to adapt. This is where it begins, the slow, silent erosion of self. You think you're being kind. You think you're being mature. You think you're keeping the peace. But really, you're becoming a ghost inside your own life. Carl Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But the cost of that privilege is exile, not from the world, but from the version of you that the world preferred." So what do? We cling to the illusion that if we're good enough, we'll be loved properly, if we keep being patient, if we keep forgiving, if we keep bending, someone will finally see us. But they never do, because the longer you suppress yourself to be loved, the more you teach people to love your suppression, not you. That's the trap. Psychologically, it's rooted in what's called fawning behavior, a trauma response where you appease others to avoid conflict or rejection. It's a learned survival mechanism, but over time, it becomes your identity. You're the helper, the peacemaker, the selfless one, the person who never causes drama. But here's the cruel irony. The more low maintenance you become, the more people believe you don't have needs at all, and so you vanish. Bit by bit, boundary by boundary, until one day you wake up, respected by everyone, but seen by no one. This internal split between who you are and who you pretend to be becomes unbearable, and yet it feels safer than the alternative. To disappoint others in order to remain whole, because the moment you choose yourself, you risk losing the life that was built around your self-abandonment. That's why loneliness hits so hard. It's not just about missing people, it's about facing the void where your old identity used to live. Nietzsche spoke of this when he said, "You must be willing to burn yourself in your own flame." How could you rise anew if you have not first become ashes? But nobody tells you how long the ashes last, how empty it feels when you stop performing, how awkward it is to speak your truth and hear silence in response, how terrifying it is to say no and watch how quickly people stop calling. This is the price of self, not the Instagram version with inspirational quotes and yoga mats, but the real version where you sit in your room watching your old life dissolve and wonder if you made a mistake. It's here that philosophy becomes more than an idea. It becomes survival, because when the noise of others falls away, you are left alone with the most important question: who am I, when I am no longer who they needed me to be? Viktor Frankl, the Holocaust survivor and existential psychologist, once said, "When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves." But changing yourself is not about becoming more, it's about shedding what was never you in the first place. The problem is, we've confused connection with compliance. We think belonging means being accepted as we are, but most of the time, it means being accepted as we perform. And when we stop performing, we find out who never loved us. They just loved the version of us that served them. This is the existential loneliness that comes when you finally choose yourself. It's not a flaw, it's not a punishment. It's a sign that you're no longer willing to betray yourself to keep others comfortable. A sign that your worth is no longer tied to your usefulness, that your soul is no longer for rent. that your presence is no longer a product to be negotiated. But here's the uncomfortable truth. When you become whole, you lose the people who only knew you in pieces, and that loss will feel like death. Because, in many ways, it is a death. The death of false belonging, the death of performative peace, the death of the mask you wore for survival. But only when something dies can something true be born. So now the question is no longer, why do I feel lonely? The real question is, what false life did I have to burn just to return to myself? And can I sit in this silence long enough to hear my own soul speak? Because when you finally choose yourself, the first thing you will hear is silence. But the next thing you will hear is the truth at first glance. Choosing yourself seems like the obvious answer, like a spiritual awakening, a triumphant act of rebellion. And in many ways it is. But what they don't tell you is that the first consequence of choosing yourself is watching your world shrink. You don't just lose people, you lose patterns, roles, routines, identities. Everything that once gave you a sense of stability, even if it was toxic, draining, or fake, suddenly collapses, because choosing yourself doesn't just threaten the people around you. It threatens the entire system that depended on your self-denial. In psychology, there's something called homeostasis, the tendency of systems to resist change in order to maintain equilibrium. Your relationships are no different if you've always been the quiet one, the giver, the fixer, the forgiver. The moment you shift even slightly, others feel it, like a disturbance in the force, not because they're evil, but because they've built a version of safety on your predictability. So, when you start saying things like, I don't want to talk right now, I'm not available this weekend, I actually don't agree with that, this doesn't feel good to me, they don't hear honesty, they hear rebellion, they hear betrayal, because the role you played kept their world intact, and now you're rewriting the script mid-performance. This is the part that nobody claps for. There's no applause, no congratulations, just confusion, friction, sometimes outright rejection. Because what's really happening is this: you're stepping out of a shared illusion, while everyone else is still invested in it. That illusion might have been the perfect daughter, the reliable friend, the understanding partner, the selfless co-worker. Whatever it was, it gave others comfort. And now that you've stopped pretending, they're uncomfortable, and their discomfort becomes your loneliness. But it goes deeper than that. Once you choose yourself, you start seeing the architecture of your past compliance. You begin noticing how often you said yes when your soul whispered no. How much laughter you faked just to keep the mood light. How many parts of yourself you buried to keep peace in the room. How many understandings were actually emotional manipulations in disguise. This is not just painful, it's disorienting, because you start to wonder, if none of that was really me, then who was living my life all these years? The consequences aren't always external. Sometimes the greatest backlash comes from within. Your own mind will fight you, sabotage you, shame on you. Your inner critic, forged from years of conditioning, will whisper things like, you're being selfish, you're overreacting, you're the problem, you've changed, and they'll be right. You have changed. You've changed from someone who endured to someone who now expects to be respected. You've changed from someone who tolerated emotional crumbs to someone who demands a full meal. But your nervous system doesn't know that's a good thing. It only knows it feels unsafe, alone, different. You see, there's something called neuroceptive dissonance. It happens when your body perceives something good, like self-respect, as something dangerous, simply because it's unfamiliar. This is why healing feels so wrong at first. Because you've been taught to find safety in your suffering, comfort in your compliance, belonging in your brokenness. So when you break those patterns, when you choose yourself, your entire nervous system screams, go back, apologize, be small again, be safe. But that's not safe. That's self-abandonment, wearing a disguise. And then there's the spiritual weight. You start to feel like a stranger in your own story. You walk into rooms you used to feel welcome in, and suddenly feel like an intruder. You laugh at jokes that no longer amuse you. You sit in conversations that feel like echoes of your former self. And all the while, you feel this quiet ache, this lonely hum of realization. They don't know me anymore. Because I never let them. And even worse, they loved me. But they never saw me. That's the consequence that stings the most. Not that people leave you, but that they never truly found you in the first place. So why go through all this? Why endure the loneliness, the guilt, the backlash, the silence? Because eventually you realize there is a deeper kind of loneliness than being alone. And it's being surrounded by people who only love your mask. And once you see that, once you feel the weight of that truth, you begin to understand choosing yourself is not what creates your loneliness. It only reveals the loneliness you've been living with all along. That hollow ache in the background of your friendships. That sense of emptiness after every fun gathering. That fatigue you feel when you're always the one who understands, but is never understood. That wasn't connected. That was a performance. And now, finally, you've stopped performing. And yes, it's lonely. Painfully, brutally lonely. But it's honest. And in time, honesty becomes intimacy. First with yourself, then with those who can meet you where you really are, not where you used to hide. Because the beautiful, tragic truth is, you cannot build true connection on top of self-abandonment. But you can build a new life on the ruins of false belonging. There comes a moment quiet, subtle, and almost unnoticeable, when you stop waiting for someone to rescue you. You stop hoping someone will understand you, finally see you, love you the way you've always longed for, and instead you do something radical, something almost sacrilegious in a world addicted to validation. You choose yourself, not out of pride, not out of ego, but out of exhaustion, because you realize no one is coming, no one is going to reach inside your chest, pull out your soul and say, this is worthy. That moment is the quiet birth of your rebellion. But it doesn't look the way movies make it look. There's no dramatic soundtrack, no cheering crowd, no one applauding your decision. In fact, it often looks like retreat, like not replying to that message, like walking away from a family dinner, like sitting alone in a car, staring out the windshield, realizing if I want peace, I have to stop begging for it from people who benefit from my chaos. The rebellion begins in the small things. It's not in grand speeches or public declarations. It's in the quiet moments when you do not explain yourself, when someone tries to pull you back into an old role, and instead of engaging, you just smile gently and walk away. It's in setting boundaries you know will be misunderstood, and holding them anyway. It's in saying, I know this makes you uncomfortable. I know you think I've changed. I have, and I'm not sorry. This is how you reclaim your soul, not by fighting others, but by refusing to fight yourself anymore. You might think healing is about becoming softer, and it is, eventually. But first, healing makes you sharp, clear, uncompromising, because you have to cut away everything that's not real. Everything that was built on appeasement, fear, guilt, and people-pleasing. It's a shedding, a burning dot sometimes. That means walking away from lifelong relationships. Sometimes it means disappointing your parents. Sometimes it means being the villain in someone else's story simply because you chose your own. And here's the paradox. The moment you stop abandoning yourself is the moment others begin accusing you of betrayal. This is why it takes courage, because breaking free isn't just about escaping others. It's about escaping your old self, the version of you who tolerated too much, who smiled too wide, who apologized for things that weren't your fault, who shrunk to keep the peace, who said yes just to feel wanted. That version of you was never fake. It was survival. But survival is not the same as wholeness. And there comes a day when surviving is no longer enough. In the words of Carl Jung, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But Jung also knew the cost. To become who you truly are, you must confront who you've pretended to be, and more importantly, you must be willing to let that version die. Here's what no one says. Rebirth feels like death at first. It feels like grief, like heartbreak, like standing in the ruins of your old life, holding nothing but silence. But here's the thing about silence. It's not empty. It's space, for you to meet yourself, maybe for the first time, to sit with your own thoughts and not flinch, to feel your feelings without editing them, to hear the sound of your own soul and trust it. This is the beginning of self-respect, not a loud declaration, but a quiet reunion. So how do you break free? You stop arguing with people committed to misunderstanding you. You stop chasing closure from those who were never open to begin with. You stop seeking love in places that only wounded you. Instead, you begin to build a new life, from scratch, from silence, from sovereignty. You build it on new agreements. I do not owe anyone access to me. I can be kind without being a doormat. My worth is not up for debate. My boundaries are not punishments. They are acts of love. I am allowed to protect my peace, even if it costs me connection. And slowly, things begin to shift. The loneliness softens, not because you're surrounded by people again, but because you're no longer lonely within yourself. You start to enjoy your own company. You laugh at your own jokes. You cry in your own arms. You become a home you don't have to leave. To feel safe, this is the rebellion, not against others, but against the version of you that thought you needed to earn love by bleeding for it, eventually. And it takes time. New people arrive, but they don't love your mask. They love your truth. They don't want you to shrink. They want you to rise, because now you've built a life where you are not dependent on being liked, but devoted to being real. And in that kind of life, connection becomes sacred, not desperate, because you are no longer starving for love. You are already full. So yes, it's lonely. At first, painfully so, but there's a different kind of loneliness waiting on the other side. The loneliness of expansion, of no longer fitting into the spaces that once defined you, of outgrowing roles you thought you'd play forever, of finally seeing the world not through the eyes of fear, but through the eyes of self-respect. That's the rebellion, and it begins with one quiet, courageous moment where you whisper to yourself, I choose me, and I won't abandon myself again. Close your eyes and imagine this. You're sitting alone at a cafe, no one is calling. No one is texting. There's no plan waiting for you. And somehow you are okay. Not euphoric, not thrilled, but quiet, whole. You're not performing. You're not trying to be understood. You're not explaining your decisions to people who never really listened in the first place. You are simply being, and for the first time in your life, it feels enough. That's the truth no one prepares you for. The most powerful moment in your life isn't when others accept you. It's when you no longer need them to. This is the real paradox of self-respect. It often leads to isolation. But that isolation is sacred, necessary, transformative. The loneliness you feared, the loneliness you avoided by contorting yourself to fit into other people's molds, it becomes your teacher. Because when you sit in that silence long enough, you realize something almost unspeakably beautiful. You were never truly alone. You were just never truly with yourself. There's a difference between being lonely and being disconnected. Most of us mistake one for the other. We think we're lonely because we're unloved, but really we feel empty because we've abandoned the relationship that matters most, the one with ourselves. We gave our time, our energy, our heart, our soul to people who didn't even know how to receive it. And in the process, we starved the part of us that always knew the truth. You do not need to be chosen to be worthy. You only need to choose yourself. But here's where it gets even more paradoxical. Once you choose yourself, once you stop chasing validation, once you become the source of your own peace, that's when the world starts to respond differently. Not immediately, not magically, but gradually. You begin to attract people who feel safe, who don't want to use your energy, they want to witness it, who don't fear your boundaries, they respect them, who don't punish your truth, they celebrate it. Because now you're not looking for someone to fill a void, you're sharing from a place of fullness. But here's the kicker, the cost of that truth is everything that isn't real. You will lose people. You will disappoint your past self. You will grieve friendships that once felt eternal. You will watch old dreams die, the ones that were built on approval. And that grief is real. It hurts like hell, but something deeper is happening. The scaffolding of your false self is falling apart, so the architecture of your real self can finally rise. Viktor Frankl once said, "When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves." But the real change isn't external. It's not about being stronger, louder, more successful. The change is inward. It's when you finally stop seeing yourself as a project to be fixed and begin seeing yourself as a presence to be honored. The ultimate truth is this: self-respect is not a feeling. It's a frequency. It's the vibration you emit when you're no longer negotiating your worth. It's the quiet dignity in your voice when you say no without apology. It's the strength behind your eyes when you don't justify your solitude. It's the peace you carry when you are no longer trying to be understood, only to be honest. That frequency becomes your life's compass, and when you live from it, everything shifts. You stop rushing, you stop proving, you stop comparing, you stop needing your life to look like anyone else's. You stop being at war with yourself, because now your allegiance has changed. You're not loyal to comfort anymore. You're loyal to truth, and sometimes that truth is brutal. It tells you to walk away, to start over, to be alone, to feel everything you've been running from. But in that honesty, in that raw, terrifying honesty, there's something you haven't felt in years: freedom. Because when you finally choose yourself, you're no longer a puppet in someone else's play. You're not a mirror for someone else's insecurity. You're not a placeholder. in someone else's story. You are your own author. You write your own lines. You set the stage. You decide the tone and the audience. They may leave. They may judge. They may stay silent. But you stay with yourself, for yourself, as yourself. That is the ultimate truth. Not one of fantasy or self-help slogans, but of blood, grief, silence, and sovereignty. The loneliness of finally choosing yourself is real, but so is the clarity, the dignity, the peace, the power, and the unshakable freedom that follows. So if you're in that place now, in between worlds, in between people, in between versions of yourself, if you're grieving who you were and terrified of who you're becoming, let this be your confirmation. You are not broken, you are breaking free. And yes, it's lonely. But the deeper you go, the more you will find that loneliness isn't the absence of others, it's the space you needed to finally meet you. Welcome home.